So for this video, we're going to look at how to set up our AOVs and camera ready to export for visual effects. So we've got our ship, which has a material. We've also created a sky dome light, and then we've added the ambient occlusion AOV. So the next thing is any animation that you want on your model or models is where you do this. So for me, I want my ship just to fly straight. So I only want 2 seconds worth of footage, and I'm going to film at 24 frames per second. So I'm going to set my viewport to 48 seconds and then change the preferences, which is just down here, to playback speed 24 FPS times 1 and save. So we now need to key point any changes in. So for the starting position, I'm going to leave it as is, where it is. I'm going to scale it down a little bit, put it there, and press S. Now this keyframes the positions and transforms of the object. Now I'm going to go to frame 48, and at frame 48 I want the ship to be over here. So I'm going to press S again to keyframe it into this position. Now over this period of time, over the 48 frames, the ship is going to move from its start to its finished position. Now you can do a lot more advanced animations, but this is just for the example. Next, we need a camera to record. So we're going to go to Create, Cameras, and Camera and Aim. Now I like to use this one because it provides us a lot more control over the camera itself than just using a standard camera. Now to go to the camera, we press F because it's selected. And I like to make them a little bit bigger because they're very, very small. So on our outliner, we press the group, press R, and go to the cube in the middle and scale them up a fair bit so they're nice and easy to see. So now we zoom out, maybe a little bit smaller. So now we need to make sure that we press Q and select just the camera and then keyframe its current position. Now we can change this, but it's just a good step to have, otherwise you're not going to be able to render from your camera. So we're going to use the sphere or the ball, and wherever that ball is, the camera is going to look. Now I want to have an effect where we're just looking up and the ship comes flying past. I don't want to follow it, and I don't want the camera to move. So I'm going to place it around here so that it's just out of position in the shot and it flies through the shot. So have you noticed that the camera changed as we move the ball? I don't know if you see that. So wherever this ball is, the camera is going to look at it. It's just really, really helpful. So now I'm going to press back on the camera, go into the first frame and press S again to set them transforms that we've just done to the camera. So the camera should stay as it is, and the ship should move straight across. To check this, I like to go into Arnold and Render to get a really, really good view on what we're going to have. So where it says Perspective Shape, we drop that down to Camera Shape 1. So currently, in the first frame, there is no ship, which is what we want. We want it to come into shot. So as we move it across, it will update the camera's perspective. Now this seems quite zoomed in, but it's not that bad. So yeah, the camera's staying static and the ship's flying through the shot. Just what I want. So we now know that that's working. I'm happy with the camera. You may want to have pan, you may want to have more rotations, but that's up to you. Same with the animation. So now I want to render out what I have. So we're going to go back into the render settings and back into render view. We now want to change one little thing. So under window in the Arnold render view, we're going to make sure display settings is ticked. Now what we're going to do is put denoiser into our render, and it's going to get rid of any little bits of noise that we get on our renders. So under add imager, we're going to put on denoiser optics. And that is then going to apply the denoiser to our scene. Now, we're going to set up our AOVs that we want to export and get the render settings ready. So, we're going to go back onto render settings, which is this tab here, and it opens this. Now we're going to export multiple AOVs, so then we have a lot more control when we go into After Effects. So, the ones that I want to use is ambient occlusion, which we've set up, the Z depth pass, so then we can put any blur that we want based off the depth of the scene. We're going to put in the albedo. We're going to put in the denoise albedo, the diffuse overall, with the diffuse direct and indirect, the emission, because we've got an emissive map, and the specular. Now this should be enough and everything that we need for our AOV passes. So now that we've put them as active, they will be in the render view for you to view them if you want to. It's also good to check that they are there, because if it's black, then you're not going to get anything out of it. So all ours are there. With the Z depth pass, it will be a white screen, but we need to turn down the exposure to see it. Now you might have to do this quite a lot and manually add type. That's a little bit too much. If we put it to about -12, we can see. The lighter the colour, the depth of the range. So if we focused on the dark grey, it would blur this lighter grey out. But this is what we do in After Effects. So don't worry if it is a white screen, we can adjust that after. So I'm happy with the AOVs. So now I'm ready to render. So under render settings, we need to change a few of our settings. Make sure we go to common. And what we're going to do is make sure we're under the EXR format. We're going to use EXR because it provides us with the transparent background, but we can also merge the AOVs. So it will do one render pass with one file per frame, even though there's multiple layers for each AOV. We need to then change the frame / animation extension. So we'll drop that down and we'll use a third one. Now we change this because it opens up our frame range. This allows us to state which frames that we want to render when we come to do that. So I have 48 frames and I start on frame 1. So I'm going to tell it to start on frame 1 and end on frame 48. This will provide the whole animation to render. Under renderable cameras, we're going to pick camera 1 and make sure Z depth is ticked. I'm just going to use a preset for this render, so I'm going to use the HD 1080 pixel. But you can adjust that as you want to what you want. So now, with these settings, we're ready to render. I also, under Arnold Renderer tab, like to up the diffuse one. It just gives a better lighting. So now, we're going to change our tab to rendering, which then allows us to go on the render and then press the little square next to render sequence. Make sure your current camera is camera 1 or whatever you've named your camera. You can also tell it to use an alternate output file location if you don't want to use the default. I'm going to use this and I'm going to go to spaceship and just put render. Select. If you're happy, then you can press render sequence and close, or just render sequence, and that's then going to go through it and do each frame rendered. You'll get a little viewer so you can see as it's going along. Now this may take some time, so I'll allocate time for this to happen. After this, we're going to look at After Effects and how to get that working. We're going to look at After Effects and importing our EXR files to make a video.